Timesheets are killing accounting firms across the globe. I was fortunate to catch up with Steve Major from Australia, and in this 30-minute interview with Steve, he's going to share exactly why timesheets are killing so many accounting firms. He's also going to share with you the 9-step process for moving away from timesheets to a truly value-based firm. It's a fascinating interview. Let's go and hear Steve's insights now. Come with me. So welcome everybody, and I'm really pleased to announce that on this particular issue of the show I've got Steve Major from over in Australia who's going to be telling us about pricing and in particular timesheets and why we absolutely have to kill those timesheets. And I'm sure, Steve, that the weather for you is far better than it is here. It's December as we're doing this, so outside it's incredibly cold, incredibly windy and incredibly dull here. So what's it like over there for you, Steve?
Well, it's been a beautiful day. It got to 32 degrees Celsius.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. I don't want to hear any more.
I'm located here in Brisbane, Australia, but of course, at the same time, we actually have a particular English team of cricketers in this country. So I'm a cricket fanatic. So that's been a feature as well as we record. So, no, great weather. It's summertime.
Lucky you. Okay, and now I know that we've got incredibly similar backgrounds, and just for the benefit of people who don't know my background, I know you are a chartered accountant. Perhaps you could just share a bit more of your background and also how you've got to where you are now and with your particular interest in the timesheets and pricing.
Yeah, so I qualified in 1989, way back then, and in 1995, I started my own firm. Prior to that, I'd worked in one of the national firms, not the Big Four, but one of the national firms here in Australia. And my particular speciality was complex tax law, but I got sick of that and decided, therefore, I'd start my own practice. So in 95, I launched and grew that fairly rapidly. Right from early on, I didn't want to have time-based billing. So from very early on, I had fixed pricing. I didn't truly understand value pricing until I got further down the track. But and then in 2005, I sold that practice. But during the course of being a practitioner, I met Paul Dunn of Results Accountant Systems, or formerly, and I got quite chatting to Paul, and Paul introduced me to Ron Baker, who some phenomenal work on value pricing, and it was through some of Ron's work that I sort of smartened up my act in getting to value pricing. But Mark, before this interview we were talking, you said that you made every mistake in the book in your practice. Well, I think I'll want to take that honour for here in Australia. So I certainly stumbled along in implementing value pricing in my own firm, but it worked. I grew the practice very well, and then it had got to a fairly significant size that I needed to do something else, and I was approached to sell. So I sold out, and then since then I've been helping the profession in understanding value pricing and the timesheet, which we'll get into a bit more, but not just the accounting profession, but law as well. But obviously accountants, given my background, are probably the predominant client base in how to implement value pricing, get rid of the timesheet, and build a better practice.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you for that. I know that you are a big advocate of the fact that timesheets are killing accounting firms, and we absolutely have to get rid of the timesheet, and I certainly agree with that. But I'd be interested to hear your take on exactly why we should be getting rid of a timesheet.
Well, as sad as what I'm about to say is, it's the unfortunate truth. Now, these figures I'm about to quote are Australian, but I'm sure they can be translated into the UK, the US, everywhere. Depression rates amongst professionals is 4 times the national average.
Wow.
And 4 times. It's not just slightly above, it is 400% above what the national average is. Now, that's clinically diagnosed depression, and it's a very large, comprehensive study done by a mental health organisation here in Australia. where they examined the professions, and accountants and lawyers were found to be 4 times the national average. So part of the reason that's driving that, I feel, is the type of business that the professions have got. And the timesheet is like this underpinning that's in the firm that's creating these set of behaviours that is really making it a terrible place to work. And I know I get a little bit passionate about this because I just think that it is creating these practices that have got these behaviours that we as practitioners just don't want to be around. And we don't want to be involved as a partner in those sort of things. And we're seeing that the next generation that are coming out of uni and coming out of qualification, you know, starting to ask some really hard questions about, do they want to work in a firm where everything's command and control, timesheet orientated, etc. So I think it's the timesheet that is driving a lot of these behaviours, that's driving a condition that can lead to such a dramatic statistic as 4 times the national average. So whilst that might sound alarmist or whatever, even those that mightn't get to the point of the unfortunate state of clinically diagnosed depression, I still think, unfortunately, too many accountants are just not enjoying business. And we've got to be looking at what's causing that fact and how can we have more money. We all want to be more profitable, but more meaning and more freedom in our business. And that's why I'm so passionate about getting rid of the timesheet.
Yeah, I can understand that. I know when I started my accounting firm back in 1996, I started off with timesheets because I just assumed that was the way you had to do business in the profession. That's what I'd been taught. And like you, I met with the likes of Paul Dunn and Ron Baker a few years later after starting my practice, and it was about 4 years down the road where I trashed the timesheet, and having done it, never ever looked back. It completely transformed my accounting firm. So the stats you give about depression rates, they're really well, yeah, quite sobering. But in what other ways are and perhaps what's causing that? What other ways are timesheets killing the accounting firm? What sort of problems are they creating in an accounting firm?
So to drill into it, it creates, well, first a whole set of behaviours, and let's just go into some of those behaviours that are creating. So we're judging everybody, whether it's the owner or whether it's any team member. We're judging them by one number only. It's their billable hours this week, this month, this year. So everything that is therefore is judged on time, not on any connection of value that they've brought to the table. And I'm talking internal here. We're not yet focused on the customer. This is just an internal system that we've got where we're valuing everybody by how much they've been able to put on the clock. So that, as a result, creates then the knock-on impact that if we're judging everybody by that magic, billable hour, the how many hours this week, this year, this quarter, then even the partners are judged by that amongst each other if it's a multi-partner firm. But even in a sole partner, all we're looking at is this billable hour. So there's a inherent competition between team members as a result that is happening. So if somebody is, let's say, fakes the timesheet a bit, fudges it, and is getting 9 billable hours a day instead of the other person getting 8 billable hours, well, the 9 billable hour must be better, which of course is not true, but under this metric, it's deemed to be true. And therefore that person gets rewarded over the person doing 8. Yet the person doing 8 might have actually had a much more effective solution and might be just actually working smarter. That just does not come into that equation. As a principle, all we're judging our team members on is their ability to punch out so many hours. So we're not interacting as humans. They've just become machines in this factory called the accounting firm. So everything is this machine orientated. There's just no element of allowing humanness. And we can question that, but what we reward is what we get. And if we are rewarding based on how somebody's timesheet is looking, this month, then that's what we're going to get. We're going to get behaviour that reflects that. From the practitioner themselves point of view, now looking at the client, there's this inherent conflict that is always happening between the firm and the customer. And the conflict is we want to put more time on the clock to bill more, but the customer, all they care about is results. And managing that tension daily, but as a practitioner, it just eats away, it chews away at. So we've got this internal tension happening, and then we've got this external tension happening with the customer. The customer wants value. They want to understand what they're getting. They want a result. They want some sort of outcome, whereas a firm that is using a timesheet, all they want is so many hours on the clock. Yeah, we might notionally know that we need to give a result, but at the end of the day, what we reward on, and we're rewarding ourselves on the billable hour. So there's this tension that is just, we're pulling ourselves in different directions. And that's why it becomes so uncomfortable internally, externally. So it's these tensions, and I haven't gone into all of the behaviours, but it's these set of behaviours that we're creating that just because all we're measuring ourselves and our team members on is the billable hour, then it creates this incredible tension.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And there certainly are lots and lots of disadvantages of timesheets of the billable hour. The thing I think that always stands in my mind is, as you've suggested, is that it creates the focus on the wrong thing. The focus is on time. The focus is on being, how can we do things quicker, which doesn't affect the impact on the customer at all. Whereas if we can focus everything around value pricing, we drive the whole practice towards focusing on how can we add much more value to the customer, which is what we should be doing as professionals. And I know one of the things that you talk about, Steve, is you talk about these 9 phases for how we move from trashing the timesheet to starting to move towards value pricing. And I'd be fascinated to hear, in overview, what those phases are.
So yeah, and I won't go. I could bore you for the next hour, but no. In fairness, so the biggest question that is often asked is, well, if we get rid of the timesheet, what do we do? So I'm talking about here in these 9 phases that we've got to move away from a firm that is totally orientated around time with to a firm that is orientated around value, something that I know that you talk a lot about as well, Mark. So it starts there with value, understanding exactly what the value is that we're doing for a client, how to communicate that, firstly, how to understand truly what the value is of what we do. It sounds so simple, but that's actually a really big challenge, as I know that you would know. Then with the next element of that is we've got to be able to, how do we communicate the not just the value, but how do we then communicate the price to our customer, and how do we set the price that is connected to value? I talk a lot about the solutions that we offer. I know that you might talk about options, whatever, but it's a similar sort of concept of what solutions are we offering. Then we get to the real nub of one important phase, is if we're not going to have a timesheet anymore, we've got to have a project management aspect. But project management, remembering we are knowledge businesses, at the end of the day we're providing our expertise. We're an accountant, we've got knowledge on whether it's just purely the financial management accounting sense, or whether it's the income tax, or whether there's some specialty as the accounting firm. We're providing knowledge, but we need to have a project management focus, not just how much time we're putting up. So we need to have this emphasis around understanding the skills of project management in a knowledge firm. The next phase that we talk about is, if we're no longer measuring productivity and efficiency, what are we measuring? And we need to have metrics. Hey, we're accountants, we love numbers. So we need to be measuring some important aspect. We need to be measuring things that are actually relevant to the customer. So Ron Baker talks a lot about key predictive indicators instead of key performance indicators, but this is where we need to be putting together a set of metrics. So that is a really key part. We're in business to make a dollar. We're in business to provide meaning, and we need to have metrics that connect with that. One of the big challenges in the implementation of the removal of timesheet and value pricing is actually getting our team on board, as they totally agree that they want to do it, but they're so used to often, unless you're a total new startup, they're so used to a timesheet environment that we need to think about the fact of how to get them on board, how to connect them with understanding value and understanding the connection to the customer, and that no longer do we have this time orientation. The second last part that we need to consider is that with a project management mindset, we also need to then be constantly looking at how can we innovate. So having some sort of system in place that we're constantly refreshing, how can we do that project better, how can we do that service better, how can we provide that solution in a better manner. So having an innovation process. And then finally, and this is, I think, where it's so often missed as well, is the fact that we're a timeless practice and value pricing. We need to get that message out into the marketplace. It is a marketing tool. So we need to use every resource that we can, and we've got so many nowadays in the age of technology, but to communicate that message, because it's an important positioning aspect. So that's in a quick overview of all of the aspects, but I hope that gave you a little bit of a snapshot, but there's a whole component, because it's a new business model from start to finish, and it's a mindset, and it needs to filter through everything that we do.
Yeah, no, that's a great framework, Steve, to work from. I suppose the big objection I often get when I talk to accountants here in the UK about trashing the timesheet is, I suppose, two aspects to it. Is, okay, well, if I trash the timesheet, how do I know which of my team are performing and which are not performing? And how do I know which of my clients I'm making profits on and which I'm not making profits on? And I know you talked about across those 9 phases, you touched on we need to have different measurement systems. So perhaps if you could drill down a bit more into that area, how else do we measure the performance of our team? How else do we measure the profitability of jobs if we're not keeping timesheets?
Okay, so I really have to be careful on this one about measurement team, because the simple answer to that is they need to learn the skills of leadership. But I know that we need to, I can't be flippant. I like to be, but I can't be flippant on that. I mean, there are so many businesses out there who, through the use of actual true leadership, are understanding, how their team members are working, not through the use of some, record of past activities on a timesheet. So we need to have a proper management focus on how we're mentoring our teams, how we're knowing what they're doing, not this time orientation. It is true leadership skills, not it's not this focus on the past. So if we are waiting for some point a quarterly review to understand and know that person did 82% billable hours in that quarter as our point of knowing whether that staff member has done their job or not, it is way too late. And also there's a massive misconception there. Anyhow, just because that person got 82% and somebody else in the team only got 78%, the person who got 82%, it really doesn't tell you a thing about whether they were actually really doing their job anyhow. What we'd want to know is whether they're coming up with ways of doing things better, whether they're progressing their, if they're in a pure technical role, progressing their technical skills further. That's what we really need to get in and understand of how they've progressed in their role and what their expectations, not what is recorded on a timesheet. We need to be looking at effective. So that's the first one, is we need to become, as practice owners, we need to become better leaders, and by being better leaders, we'll have better team members and we'll be able to connect with the performance. The other question that you mentioned is how will we know which clients are profitable? In other words, we know our costs. I find that one quite intriguing as well. As accountants, I think we do some crazy stuff on knowing what costs are about anyhow, because we're not oftentimes getting the real costs of what we're of our client anyhow under a timesheet model. So because time, I love the terms in accounting practice of write-ups, write-offs, that's the words we use here in Australia, which really are meaningless numbers. They're not really any true profit anyhow. So I think the timesheet doesn't really give us a true cost of profitability anyhow, because there's this notional, if it was a true absorption-based system, activity-based costing like a factory was, it would have a different number than what the timesheet's giving us anyhow. So we're not even utilising true activity-based costing if we were a factory, which I don't think we are a factory anyhow, so I don't think that method of accounting can work anyhow. But I think then we can customise it, though, from firm to firm. So to use an example I had in my firm, I had 12 professional staff. Now, just through how it worked out, not because I liked the number 3, they were in 4 teams of 3. And I created that as a pod and could say that team was responsible for this set of clients and this structure, and I had a P&L that in essence was those people. And I could determine that team was working, and this is what the revenue that team put together, and yes, I knew what their wages were. So I could get, shall we say, a gross profit for that team. But I was looking at it in an overall P&L, not as this point of view of the cost. Now, different firms will have different ways of looking at that. That was just one methodology I used. But I know a firm in Sydney here that's a 14-partner firm that do not break it up in any way. They have one P&L for the firm, and they go, we're in this together. They don't have timesheets. They don't. They value pricing. They really do value price. And they go, we don't care about what each specific unit is. We're going to look at this as an entirety and bring the team together. Now, if we looked at their average profitability compared to industry, they're well above industry average. Are there clients in there that may not be doing as well as others? Potentially, yes, but they're taking a more total look at it. I would probably still like to drill down a little bit, but they're going the other way and go, forget it, we want to focus on a more effective solution. So I appreciate those objections. I too come up with those are regularly made to me. But I think the irony of both is the timesheet is actually not giving the information people think they are. It is giving anyhow.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I suppose my two thoughts on that is, one is you're right, they're not giving us the information, but even if we think it is giving the information, my own personal experience when I was in practice and many firms that I speak to is even having got that information, they do nothing with it. So in other words, if there's a client that's consistently under recovering on jobs and making write-offs, does the accountant therefore put the fees up significantly? Very often not, because they're scared of losing the client. So if you're not going to take the necessary action to make things better, why measure the numbers in the first place? And the other thought is that, and I think someone asked me this many years ago when I was in practice, and it certainly made a lot of sense, and that was, if someone was to take away all the timesheets tomorrow, would you know which of your profitable clients and which of the unprofitable ones are? And the answer is, well, yes, most people do. You know which ones are you know which clients instinctively are the ones that drain all of the time and resources, that complain and moan. You don't need the timesheets to tell you which are the underperforming clients, and likewise you don't need the timesheets to tell you which are your A-class clients that really value what you do, because you just know that.
And with a project management approach, and then also having some sort of review system afterwards, in a project manager, I'm still not, I say I totally get rid of the timesheet, but I'm still not ignoring time in a resources sense. Time becomes a constraint, not a resource. And to explain that further, it's a constraint on how we're operating business. We've got only so many people in our firm, and we've got these jobs on board. We need to look at what we've got to do and how to organise that. So we need to view time as that constraint. And then in the review process at the end of the job, end of what we're doing, the project with the client, that's the time when we can go, well, this didn't turn out according to what we'd planned in the project because of A, B, C, or this went better because of X, Y, Z. And we can harness that knowledge then on either other clients or on that client the next time we do that set of tasks. So that's going to give us that information in a much more, yes, it might be more subjective, but it's in a much more detailed manner to get an effective solution for our client.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, Steve. So we're running towards the end of our time together now. So just to wrap up, I'd be interested to know from you what the sort of things that you're working on at the moment, and if anybody wants to make contact with you, what should they do next to make contact with you?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and it's been great on this as well. The big focus, and it's been a focus of this interview of mine, has been around killing the timesheet. It's become a real hobby horse of mine. So I'm doing some workshops here in Australia, but I'm also doing some online events around the kill the timesheet. So if they search for that, and they'll find myself on that regard. So Pricing Power is my business name, and if they look for that, they can connect with me, join on the newsletter, and they'll keep informed of what I'm doing on this regard of killing the timesheet. Obviously, I do also talk a lot about value pricing, but I'm really honing in on the fact that I believe that there is no place in a professional firm for a timesheet.
Okay, agree 100%. Well, what I'll do is, for the benefit of people watching this, I'll put all the various links that they need to contact you, Steve. I'll put them below this video. So that just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I found the 9 phases framework fascinating. I'd love to learn more about that. But unfortunately, our time's finished for now. I'm sure we'll be in touch again soon. So thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking again soon, Steve.
Yep, thank you, Mark.
Take care. Goodbye for now.